Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'm going to be reviewing Randy Ingerson's nonfiction work, The Snowflake Method. Fortunately, I read this on ebook, so I don't have a cover to show you. I'll talk briefly about the author, go into an explanation of what the book covers, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and who I'd recommend the book to. We'll finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Randy Ingerson is a novelist. He is a PhD, I believe, in physics. He's best known for this work, The Snowflake Method, though he has also written and published some fiction. Some of it is Christian fiction, some of it is science fiction, but he has done that as well. The Snowflake Method, this book is the first thing of his that I've read, and what it is his personal 10-step method to outlining his novels. He shows this, the way the book is structured, kind of goes through each one of the steps in the beginning, kind of breaks down how they all build off each other. He then goes into what is really the bulk of the book. There's essentially a novel within the book that he has written starring the character of Goldilocks from Three Little Bears, essentially, and her journey to become a writer. And he uses this to kind of walk through each one of the steps, why they're necessary, what's the purpose of each one, what are some kind of roadblocks that people often hit with each one of the steps. Then he goes into, outlines each one of the steps again. Then what he does is he takes the novel that you just read, which is essentially the story of Goldilocks wanting to become an author, and then he slots those into each one of these steps, basically showing you how he would have outlined the novel you just read. And then the book ends. So I really enjoyed, what I enjoyed a lot about the book was I thought it did a good job of using that novel that you read and tying that back into the 10 steps and why they're useful. So I enjoyed kind of that parable. It's not the world's most complex story. You know basically all the characters he uses, like Grimm's fairy tales characters to tell this story, but it's enjoyable enough, and I think it does a good job of outlining some barriers that people may have in this methodology. I also like that he's very open and honest with it and basically says, everyone has their own method of doing things. This one is mine. I reviewed a book for the channel earlier called Writing Without Rules. I'll leave a link to that in the comment section below. That author also had a similar attitude, but he was much more of a right by the seat of your pants person. And this book, I think, nestles really nicely between something like his methodology for planning a novel and someone like a J.K. Rowling or J.R.R. Tolkien, who have much more elaborate plotting or planning methods that they use. So I like kind of that attitude of it. He has also a very much like take what you want, so you don't even really have to use this wholesale if you don't want to. If there are parts of it you like and you want to take for your own specific method, cool. The parts that I thought were really good was there's a section in the end of the book where you see kind of his character Bible, so to speak, for this. I think that section kind of breaks down, would be a good breakdown if someone's writing a book in the quote-unquote real world. I think that if you're able to answer those questions for each of the characters that you have in your novel, it plays really nicely and really makes you think about the purpose of that character. There's one exception. I'll get into that in a little bit in the cons section, but so I thought that was cool. I thought having the novel that he wrote compared to kind of his notes and planning and plotting for the novel using his method was really effective. So I enjoyed those things. The book is relatively easy to read. The novel section itself, like I said, it's not like the world's best fiction or anything, but I think it gets the job done. And I think it has enough humor to it that you don't really mind it. It's a little corny, but I think it does what it's supposed to do. On the cons section, most of the cons that I had were really things that I thought were missing with the methodology itself. I think that I didn't see any part where it kind of talks about brainstorming. So the book kind of assumes that you have an idea for a novel that you can put into a sentence. And the book kind of talks about how long it should take you to do each one of these steps. Obviously, that's going to depend on the author and depend on how much uninterrupted time and how much you can devote to this if you're someone who doesn't make your living writing. So I thought that part of it, there doesn't seem to be a brainstorming section where you say, well, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to come up with things that I like about the book. or so I'm going to come up with ideas for the book so I can kind of flow into that one sentence. And so that part of it, it kind of presupposes that you have your idea already, and maybe that's not unfair, but in other methodologies and stuff like that, I've had people basically, one of the steps they recommend is having some kind of brainstorming. And I think that makes sense. The idea that you're going to come to this and you're like, oh, I have my idea, let's go. I don't know how realistic that is. So the other part of it that kind of, I think this methodology worked really well for something that is a hero's journey type story where you have kind of a main character and you have supporting characters. So you think of the story of Star Wars, depending on how you view it, it's either, Luke Skywalker's journey or it's Darth Vader's journey. But it's one of those two characters, the journey of those two characters. Something like that, I think like that would fit really well, where each character has kind of defined roles and you have a linear story and you're kind of moving straightforward through from beginning to end. When I've tried to write a few novels myself. I've never, unfortunately, succeeded, but I've written a little bit. And if you're writing something that's more linked by theme, so something for this channel I've reviewed would be A Visit from the Goon Squad, I think would be a good example of that. I would also, I'm trying to remember, Commonwealth by Ann Patchett would probably be a good example, and something like The Come Down by Rebecca Frumkin, I believe is her name. I think those things all, I don't know who the main character in any one of those things are. And so for something like that where it's more of a thematic link, I don't know if this method would work as cleanly. You could probably do it and make it work. I wish he had, my personal opinion, I wish he had done maybe 2 or 3 more examples of other works that are not as straightforward, if that's the right term, in his methodology, to really kind of round it out and make it a little bit more versatile. But that was kind of my big takeaway from it. Like I said, I don't think in the vast majority of fiction that people are writing would most likely fit in kind of a hero's journey type structure. But I do think that there are other novels and other ways that you could do things. A lot of contemporary literature doesn't necessarily have like a single hero's journey. It has kind of other stuff. And so other links, other themes, short stories as novel is something that's relatively common. So I don't know. Cactus League is probably another one where the main character of that is probably a little debatable. So I don't know, something like that, how well this would fit. The other thing that I kind of cared a little bit less for, in the character Bible section, there's a part where you can kind of define the character's roles. This kind of goes back to the same thing I was talking about before. I think if you have something that's like a Harry Potter or a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, it's a little bit easier to slot those as archetypes or stereotypes, however you want to define that. I think when you get into more contemporary literature, more things of that nature, where it's a little less clear of the role of a person, I don't think that would be as effective. But I may be wrong, and I may be just looking at it from the wrong angle, but that was kind of my takeaway for it. I think if you're writing something that is like a hero's journey based thing, where you do have characters who fall pretty clearly into certain roles, you have the mentor, you have the affable sidekick, you have, the tortured villain. If you have things like that, I think this would work well. But if you have different things, I guess you could always just ignore that part in it. You don't necessarily need it, but part of the way that he uses that is to kind of have these characters who's going to bounce off each other. So overall, I did enjoy it. I think who I'd recommend the book to, if you are someone who is a budding novelist and you want to find different ways that you can use to go through plotting, I think this is obviously another method. It's relatively popular from what I've heard. And I think what it does very well is plot and character. The way that the 10 steps are designed are really for you to kind of go back and forth between those, developing those two things. And so you do have something kind of innately built into the structure of this, where you're kind of always thinking about plot and character and how they bounce off each other, how they build upon each other. I will say, to his defense, he does recommend another book that I unfortunately didn't write down that deals more with themes. It deals more with like the idea that every work should have a moral compass or a moral point to the story. That also I think is pretty debatable. But I do understand by moral compass, if we mean theme, then yes, I think that most works, there's a certain amount of connectivity when you get into, well, what is the point of the story? And I've actually talked about books on this channel where to me, what was the point of this or what was the theme about? I could love the rest of the book. I'd love the characters, love the plot, be really emotionally impacted by it, but still be questioning like what the theme is. My video with Ann Patchett, Commonwealth, I remember having that kind of issue with it. As much as I like that story, if I compare something like that to something like Bonfire of the Vanities, which is also something I really, really liked, the theme in one of those I think I could explain a lot clearer than the theme in the other. I don't necessarily think that makes one better or worse, but I do think the benefit of it just gives you another layer of things to think about and talk about when you're going about your day. So that is the Snowflake Method by Randy Ingermanson. Like I said, overall, that's who I'd recommend if you're someone who's interested in writing novels and you're wanting to learn more, you don't quite have your methodology worked out. Even if you do have your methodology worked out, I think there are parts in this that, even just from a toolkit's perspective of, oh, that is an interesting way. I could use, these first 2 steps, and then once I have those 2, I can go on and use my other thing. Or I like step 8 for this. I think this is something that you could use for that. It doesn't necessarily, what's kind of cool about it is it's modular in the sense that you can kind of pick pieces you like from it even if you don't agree with everything as a whole or certain steps don't work for you. So for that reason, I would definitely check it out. And for next time, I believe I'm going to be reading Kluge. I believe it's pronounced Kluge. It could also be pronounced Kludge. Fortunately, I don't have the title. I'm going to be reading it on audiobook, and I don't have the author in front of me either. You'll learn next time, I guess. But until next time, please feel free to, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter. I'll have the link to that video, Writing Without Rules, below. Until next time, bye.